Jenny from Heart of a Mother. Today I want to share with you an answer to a question that sometimes come up, which is, how does homeschooling change you as a mother? And I've come up with some ways that I think homeschooling has changed me over the years to share with you and see if any of these resonate with you, or if maybe there's a different way homeschooling has changed you, because I bet there are many more possibilities than my list. The first way that homeschooling has changed me is my prayer and my relationship with God. I felt much closer to God before I began homeschooling because I spent more time in prayer, and that prayer time was more structured maybe, or less interrupted for sure before children. But homeschooling has enabled me to connect with God on a more casual level, for lack of a better word, where I used to picture God as this high in the sky, lofty being that he is, and that is how I would communicate with him. Now that I am down this homeschooling journey a lot and have been brought to my knees a lot by it and by life, I feel much more at ease with God and his presence next to me and with me on this journey. And it's been very interesting to look back. I was recently asked, what was your faith like before you had kids, and what is it like now? And it's been very interesting to note the change in the relationship from just a very distant God to a very right here next to me, help me in this moment God. And he is still king that reigns over all, and over all that I try to do for him. But I definitely have a different relationship, or a different perspective on who he is. And he is much more real to me now. And Christ's sacrifice for me is much more real to me than ever it was before. I am much closer to God the Son and his sacrifice and his cross than I was 15, 20 years ago. But I know at the time I felt that my faith was on fire, and it doesn't quite feel that way anymore. It's more of a constant in a good way. So there are different stops on the journey of faith, just as there are different stops on the journey of homeschooling. And that's one way that homeschooling, I think, has changed me. And a second way is kind of why that change happened. And that is that homeschooling has humbled me and forced me to surrender more to God's will and to just the day. Sarah McKenzie does an excellent job in her book, Teaching from Rest, about how the interruption to what we think we're supposed to do is an opportunity for living out God's will in that moment. It's an opportunity for virtue, really, because we can have our plan for the day and it can get derailed because we're dealing with people and we're dealing with imperfect circumstances. And that is the opportunity where we can choose love or not. And so I have been humbled by not being able to control everything. I'm pretty type A, if you hadn't figured out. And I definitely have always wanted to be kind of on top of everything. And being a homeschool mom doesn't let me do that, because I have to prioritize people over efficiency. I have to prioritize relationships over my to-do lists. And that's really, really hard. So that has been a journey, and I'm definitely not a master at it, but I feel like I've come a long way in being with these kids every day and adapting to their needs and living in relationship with them instead of on my own parallel path. That has been a very fascinating journey for me. Another way that homeschooling has changed me personally is something that kind of has both a really good side to it and a really not so good side to it. But I think that is because homeschooling, just by its very nature, makes us often feel like outsiders from the world. It's such a countercultural decision to make. Maybe not recently, there's been a lot more homeschoolers, but in general, if you're a lifelong homeschooler, that's not the average person, right? And so what's changed for me is my perspective on the world. I feel like stepping apart from what's usual and accepted and normal is good in a lot of ways, because it helps me to recognize that what our society might accept as normal is probably not what God wants, right? What we're supposed to strive for. But it also has made me very resistant and sometimes critical of that outside world, and less compassionate and less understanding. So I have to balance that. I have to balance that homeschooling does change my relationship with the world, my relationship with the culture, because we're not out there on a daily basis with other people who are living more common lives than we are. They are not spending all their hours dedicated to their children, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's very, very different. And so it's very hard for me often to identify with those people, to have conversations with them. I have to work really hard to find common ground and build relationships with the people that are not in my little bubble. But that's good too. That is good to force me outside of that comfort zone and love all of God's people. So my perspective on the world has definitely changed as a homeschooler. I'm comfortable being an outsider. I'm comfortable not doing what everybody else does and being weird, just like my kids. My kids accept that they're weird homeschoolers, and they actually love it. But it has changed my perspective on the world significantly. Another thing about me that has changed as homeschooling, that I think most of us as homeschoolers can say, is that we've learned so much knowledge in homeschooling our kids. I've been doing this for 14 years, and my education was great. I went to excellent schools, both Catholic and public. I learned a whole lot and was taught by some amazing teachers, but I pretty much promptly forgot a lot of it and didn't internalize it as I am doing now. Now, when I read a book with my children and I learn all these things I either forgot or were glossed over or were never taught to me, it's a whole new world. And it's exciting to find the literature and the stories and the even the stuff I don't like, science, that I didn't know before I started homeschooling. And I'm learning. I have one kid obsessed with NASA right now, so I'm learning all this information that never would have interested me before, but because it's his interest, I'm gaining new knowledge and appreciation for it. So definitely I have gained a lot of knowledge and internalized and really embraced a lot of knowledge that I never did growing up in my own education. And most obviously is about our faith. I grew up in a wonderful faith-filled home, but and I went to some Catholic school, but I've learned so much more about my faith through homeschooling my own kids than I did in the 20-something years before that it has been a huge gift, and it's just so exciting to constantly learn. And then the last thing is very similar, but is my favorite thing. And if you've watched my video on how I, or why I homeschool and what my favorite thing about homeschooling is this: I've learned so much about my kids as individuals. I know them. I know them from birth till now 18, and what they like and dislike, although I forget who likes which dinner and can't always keep that straight. But I know how they work. I know how they tick, right? And I can understand their emotions more than I otherwise could have. I know my kids so well. I learned so much about their interests and their insights and their feelings and their personalities. That is the best way that homeschooling has changed me, is that intimacy with my kids and knowing all about everything, which can be overwhelming at times too when you have 4 kids and it's a lot of information or a lot of insight into people that maybe is too much. But I love that. I love that homeschooling gives me that opportunity to really know my kids really, really well and bless them in return by being able to understand maybe their love language and their temperament and their personality and help them through life because of all those things that I know about them. So those are some ways that homeschooling has changed me. It's definitely changed my relationship with God and made me more humble. I've learned so much about the world, about just knowledge about my kids, and my perspective on the world has changed throughout homeschooling. And I see most of these as incredibly big blessings in my life that I embrace because of the journey that homeschooling is. I think that it's made me a better person. I think that it's made me a more virtuous person. I have a long way to go and need to continue to work on that. But the opportunities for growing in virtue and the opportunities for loving my kids and my family and my neighbors and the people around me in my community are incredible gifts that have changed me and made me a better person through homeschooling. So I hope that some of those resonated with you. I would love to hear how homeschooling has changed you. Maybe you want to drop that in the comments or send me a message at jenny@heartofamother.net and let me know. If you are looking for more of my videos, check out my YouTube channel, which is linked on the website at heartofamother.net. And I look forward to sharing more with you another time.